The story of Genesis, the creation of human beings, in Quran clearly defines or creates, as I said, for Malaika, created a chaotic environment. Up to then, life was very stable. Now they have a reality in front of them, which is a mixture of two components. And if the person or this reality pays attention to the true component, there is a space and scope to elevate himself or herself to beyond the level that the angels used to think the highest level possible. In the story of Mi'raj, for example, we see Jibreel reaches a point in which says, Ya Muhammad, this is my limitation. You are the one that can go through it, but I cannot. If I step one step forward, my whole reality will burn. I cannot take it. So this is why Quran refers to such an entity as Khalifatullah, the vicegerents, the image of Allah on earth. But at the same time, because of this perpetual conflict between, let's call it the material dimension and the spiritual dimension, Nafs Ammara is going to be there and you have to overcome. At the beginning of Tawbah, you are not in control of Nafs Ammara yet. But you certainly have realized that the shackle that Nafs Ammara has created for you is not going to be helpful if the life, which is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, terminates right now. You have no answer. 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 80 years, 100 years, what have we got to account for it? There's a hadith from Imam Musa ibn Ja'far sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, حَاسِبُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ قَبْلَ أَن تُحَاسِبُوا. Sit in your judgment of your own deed before the time comes. And there is a hadith that the mystics grab to it like anything and gravitate constantly in their conversation to it. مُوتُوا قَبْلَ أَن تَمُوتُوا. Which means being fully prepared before the time comes. Because once the nature of Nafs Ammara is such that we constantly hear and see the signs, but we don't heed to them. Again, this story I narrated it during the month of Ramadan, the story between one of the disciples of Prophet Sulaiman that came to him and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I want you to bring Azrael down and let him make a deal with me. That way before my time comes, he will give me a few warnings. He said, okay. So brought Azrael down. Whether it is a metaphor or real, a story has a reason to be told. Said, this friend of mine or my disciple wants you to make a deal. Okay, no problem. We sign a deal and goes. 25 years later, he comes back, Azrael, Hassan, let's go. So, well, hang on a minute. We had a deal. The deal was for you to give me a warning. Well, the conversation started between Azrael that says, I gave you enough warning, and he says, no. They go to Prophet Solomon, and Azrael says, his father died, that was a warning. His brother died, it was a warning. His mother died, that was a warning. His neighbors died, his teacher died, and so on. How many warnings this person wants? When Nafs Ammara takes over, sister, we don't see. There is a verse in the Holy Quran that says, فَبَصَرُكَ الْيَوْمَ حَدِيدٌ. It's just at the last minute of our life, there are a number of traditions that says the veils are removed. This is why Tawbah and repentance at that particular instant is not acceptable. Because during that particular time, you see the back and you see the future. You see the past and you see the outcome of your endeavors during your life. Now that you see the future, there is no Tawbah anymore. So this is this notion of nafs ammara being in control, you ultimately would be able to control it. But if you go through these exercises as what we call preamble to reaching a state where you can then move forward. So first, to be despondent of the past. Second, to make absolute resolution that I'm not going to go back. This is concept of Tawbat al-Nasuh that we talk about it in our tradition. Absolute, otherwise verses in the Holy Quran rejects and condemns those who yo-yo between sin and tawbah, sin and tawbah, sin and tawbah, constantly sin, constantly tawbah. This is not serious decision. Tawbah has to be a serious decision that I'm not going to go back to the lifestyle that I had in the past. So that's number two. The third condition is to start with huquq nas. If you have, during this past life, you have violated the right of individuals, you have to go back and ask them for forgiveness. If it is monetary, you have to return to them. If it is not monetary, you have done ghiba, toma, which unfortunately in our life, it is wherever you go, it's a prevalent issue. Our social conversation or social meeting begins with tuhma, ghiba, and everything else. This is a critical issue that we have to address. So we have to go back to these individuals and say, sister, brother, I was mistaken and I did something. And we have a number of stories from grand scholars. Marhum Tari, in one of his books, allude to this. He said, once in my life I made ghiba against one of the maraja in Qom. And soon I realized, and I had to travel to Tehran when he was living at that time, late afternoon, and knock at the door and ask him for his forgiveness. But here we do it on a regular basis. So if it's... go ahead.
If he doesn't forgive, that's unforgivable from God. He can't attain that forgiveness and mercy. Because he did injustice unto me, correct?
Well, if you have violated somebody's life, somebody's right, and you humbly went to him or her and said, brother, sister, I have done this, please forgive. If he doesn't or she doesn't, then you have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there is nothing you can do. Ultimately, it's going to hurt one in the day of judgment, but at least you have taken the necessary step to correct the situation. Technically, we have a number of hadith that says when a person comes to you, be generous and be compassionate. It's a good sign for one to forgive. But if he or she doesn't, then the only thing that we have is to ask Allah to somehow either soften the heart or somehow mercy from Allah to compensate for it. But
that's okay if they don't forget.
I mean, technically they should. When somebody comes, technically they should. But if they don't, the pain is too much for them to forgive. This is within their prerogative. If my life has been turned upside down because of the action that you have taken against me, it's not something that I'm going to forgive that easily, unless you compensate for it. So, but technically, because we are asked to be mindful of Allah's mercy, so we should. So that's huquq al-nas that we have to address. Then huquq Allah. I haven't done fasting, I haven't prayed, I haven't given khums, I haven't given my religious dues, etc., etc. And then I say, astaghfirullah, all is forgiven. No. You have to go and make compensation for them. Then comes to the point, sister, that I raised last week, that I have a number of scholars that I knew around the end of their life focused on this. The hadith says, then you can focus on yourself. The flesh that you have gained through sinfulness, you have to dissolve it. Go back to skin and bone. And now start flesh in obedience. And force, and the comfort that nafs had in sinning, being sinful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now has to taste the pain of submission. It's when you do this, then you can stand and say, Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would forgive. Which is going to be extremely difficult. It's not going to be that easy. So, once you make that tawbah nasuh, that you are not going to go back, that's the first step towards spiritual enlightenment. And you go literally, if you follow the instructions given by the mystics or Urafa, you move from one station to another station. So first you reject and you leave the negative characters. Then you begin to gain the positive characters. You push arrogance out. You gain humility. You push self-centeredness out. Then you become humble and helpful to others, etc., etc. These processes or stations moved one after the other, and every station, according to Urafa, there is, if I may use just this cliche, a perk that goes with it. That little bit of enlightenment that comes as one struggles through this control of nafs. The Holy Prophet says, even my nafs converted to Islam. It was the point of debate with the sister whether they were created infallible or no, they struggled for it. So clearly, full control. Even my nafs has no reality anymore. Fully in control, in my control. But others, they have to struggle to control this nafs. And this is why they say, the more you move through these stations, you have to be mindful that if you fall, the fall is going to have greater consequence for your spirituality, rather than somebody who hasn't started the journey. So it's going back to the question that we started with. Even human mind, at the end of the day, is human. Once it is somehow complemented with the revelation that comes, with the enlightenment that comes through this struggle, then it opens windows and doors that human intellect that could not see, still has veil. Because the veil that Quran فَبَصَرُكَ الْيَوْمَ حَدِيدٌ refers to the veil that comes over time. So as long as the veil exists, no matter how much human endeavor or intellectual endeavor goes into this, we still fail to understand it. Once enlightenment comes through spirituality, etc., then a different window opens for understanding things that under normal circumstance we may not have been able to. And under such circumstance, it's a personal understanding rather than a group understanding. This is why mystics say that the more enlightenment comes, the more one understands the whole relationship between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His sifat and attributes, and His emanation and tajalli, etc., etc., that in one's life. So the answer is that if we look, there's another khutbah 111, كيف يصف الله من يعجز عن صفة مخلوق مثله. We fail to clearly come up with a narrative, a language that defines our own, would define our own, relatives or people. How can, if the language fails to clearly define individual human being, how can we use this language to define the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that by nature is undefinable? That is one of those struggle jihad that we have to go through. And this is why a number of ahadith we have says, don't dwell beyond what you are capable of understanding.
I always read it in a literal sense, and I thought he was referring to the makhluqan mithlih is the angel of death, not us.
Who?
The angel of death.
Azrael.
Is that what he's not referring to in Sermon Al 11? Imam Ali?
Which khutbah?
Sermon 111.
No, it rejects. Part of it clearly states that the weakness and the limitation of human being when it comes to defining Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَكَيْفَ يَصِفُ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَعْجِزُ عَنْ صِفَةٍ مَخْلُوقٍ مِثْلَهُ. The limit.
Makhluk is not us in relation to me and her, it's in relation to a malik, correct?
Not necessarily. Makhluk, yes, it's general, but within the context of you are trying to define Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while our language failed to define ourselves. Clearly define the essence of an individual. So if our language fails to understand a limited individuals, how can we use this and think that we can gain a good picture of a limitless or the essence of limitless reality?
There was a small part in the anthology where the Imam alayhi salam says, surely he alone knows God who knows him by means of God.
Mm-hmm. That's the concept of taqwa, that Allah, the enlightenment that comes. Allah would reveal to the person through this enlightenment a better understanding of reality, which now the relationship between Allah, His attributes, and relationship between Allah and human being will have totally different meaning. In Khutbah 84, Imam clearly states that the hearts cannot understand how Allah is. Wahm and our thought cannot understand His characters and attributes. No matter how hard we try to separate and deconstruct, reconstruct, still we fail to understand it. وَلَا تُحِيطُ بِهِ الْأَبْصَارُ وَالْقُلُوبُ. Our vision, we cannot understand it, see it, and our heart, we cannot do it. It's only when you go through the true spiritual exercise, when somebody comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen and says, have you seen God? And he says, yes, how can I pray to a God that I haven't seen? But remember that you cannot see it with your just this worldly material senses. It's through your heart. Literally what it says, that again going back to the Quran, that our soul and being has similar kind of senses. We comprehend things, but on a different level. We see things on a different level. We see more a reality rather than the perception outside. So that's where هيهات إن من يعجز عن صفات ذي الهيئة والأدوات فهو عن صفات خالقه أعجز. This is Khutbah 162. It's impossible how far it is. People who fail to define or describe three-dimensional figures around them, come up with a narrative that clearly define these pictures, definitely they are not able to find a language or a narrative that defines Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So going back to the part of the lecture, the discussion that we had for today, the mystics try to avoid the use of language that so far we have discussed regarding sifat of salbiya, ijabiyya, etc., etc. They start with that language, but they instruct those who are going through this spiritual journey that wait until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enlightens your heart, and then you understand better the reality and the synthesis between the sifat attribute and the dhat, which is the essence, because they are mindful ultimately that the language is unable to express. Any questions? I didn't want it to be so somber. You've just gone into a contemplative mood.
A lot to think about.
Are we going to go more in depth on the process that they go to, or only they know?
Well, I mean, it's up to you. Where do you want to take the discussion? Certainly, there is a merit to what the mystics say. If the language that we use and the narrative that we construct fails, then we really need enlightenment, that spark that comes through absolute submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Hadith Qudsi says, "Abdi ata'ni, aj'aluka mathali, ana aqul kun fayakun wa anta taqul kun fayakun." Its station at the moment seems to be far beyond the reach of anyone. But the discussion that we had last week is clearly an indication that no religion, no faith can claim that it is there to guide humanity to the perfection if it cannot provide the example, the role models for those who would follow it. We may fail to reach that ultimate level, but certainly there is a qaida in usul, a principle, ma la yudrak kulluhu la yutrak kulluhu. Because we think that we cannot reach that highest level, does that mean that we should give up on what is attainable? Not. So we should focus on... this is why mystics claim that true believer is ibn al-waqt. You break your life into singular second and moment. The reason why we fail in our objective is that we think that this life is a continuum, in a sense, and then we look to the past and we are hopeful that we do it somewhere, compensate for it in the future. True mystics break their life into singular moment. What is my duty right now? This duty is independent of the this moment is independent of the moments in the past and independent of the moments in the future. It may never come. I will be accountable for each duty independently. If I do my best at this particular moment, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant me the mercy of many moments, then I have done something. Then if you look at it this way, you are not going to constantly think that I have another 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, and so on, and I will compensate. This moment is an opportunity missed. Hadith from Amirul Mu'mineen sallallahu alaihi wasallam, nafasul mar khutahu ila mawtih. Every breath that you take is a step towards the end. This step, once it's gone, it's not going to be replaced. So at this particular moment, what is my responsibility? In its totality, not just personal responsibility. And that is why it makes it so complicated and complex. As an individual, what is my responsibility towards myself? What is my responsibility towards my family? What is my responsibility towards my friend? What is my responsibility towards my social relationship, my family relationship, my religious obligation, etc., etc. And all of this has to be within what we call the macro understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the central issue. Taqwa, I disagree with those people that interpret it as fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A faith that centers on fear is not going to produce the right result. Is according to hadith from Amirul Mu'mineen sallallahu alaihi wasallam that says this is ibadatul abid. I'm fearful of my master. I follow the instruction. And if you desire for reward and so on, this is ibadat tujar. This is a business deal. I don't do this, you give me something hereafter. Inni lam a'budka khawfan min narika wa la tama'an fi jannatik. ولكن وجدتك أهلا للعبادة فعبدتك. This is a level that far exceeds what we understand. And that comes through, sister, that mindfulness and exercise and spirituality and enlightenment. That you really, there is, in human resource management, there is a concept which is called a human motivation theory. They say, the experts within the motivation theory, they say there are two different classes of motivation, and people fall within two different categories accordingly. There is what we call quantitative motivation and qualitative motivation. There are those that no matter how much money you give them, they are not going to prepare to work under a particular circumstance. They want for a qualitative change rather than another 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 extra. You have to change the environment where it becomes conducive to my spirituality, my life, who I am, my character, etc. And there are those who are quantitatively motivated. If you want them to work harder, I give you another extra quantity for your hours of work. The same concept can be applied when it comes to understanding faith and submitting to the command of God. There are those who are quantitatively motivated. These people, they look to the rivers of honey, etc., etc., hereafter. And they are fearful of the fire and punishment on the day of judgment. This mindset, we have no other alternative to use the language that exists in various references and texts and so on in a quantitative manner, because that's how they function. But to read munajat Sha'baniyah that you recite during the night and see what it says, asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Amirul Mu'mineen and others, to take me beyond the narrative of language. Get me close to you. During Da'a Iftitah or Da'a Kumail or anything else, they lament the fact that they are far away from the beloved. They don't talk about here Jannah and Nar in the context of physical reality, quantitative reward, etc. How close I am. Even if you put me in fire, what hurts is that I'm far away from you. This language is totally different. This mindset is totally different from somebody that sees the reward and punishment as the primary motivation. So we have both of these within our narratives. When it comes to we should always be mindful when we talk. There are those who are motivated with this concept. They are not prepared to give up and really move towards controlling the nafs ammara unless you tell them, look, this is the consequence of your action. The day of judgment, as the verse in the Holy Quran says, هَذَا كِتَابُكَ, this is what you've done. You decide. But others, every breath of their life, they are mindful of their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to work towards that level. And then we can claim the true position of being Khalifatullah on earth, where, according to the mystics, our existence embodies the characters of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You become the embodiment of all sifat of Jamal and Kamal and Jalal.
How does one get to know the asma, the names, without committing shirk?
Well, again, it's the start where the starting point comes from. If we constantly remind ourselves that you start to learn these asma and these characters, but mindful that these are purely majaz and metaphor. We use it to bring a lofty idea that we really don't comprehend closer to our comprehension. If we do it that way and mindful of that, then we are on the right direction. But again, we have to follow the mystics' argument. The true understanding comes, as Brother Hussein again alluded to one hadith, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you that opportunity. and a little bit of the veil is removed. So as the veil gets thinner and thinner, our vision and our understanding of the reality becomes better and better. And then we have better understanding of the relationship between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the attribute, etc.
Imam Sajjad's Risalat al-Uqud. So if you follow that as a mystic, isn't that on the path to attaining that?
That's the beginning.
level?
That's the beginning.
Oh, it's still the beginning?
Yes.
Oh.
Because it still defines it in our physical reality.
Yes, but when you reach that type of physical reality, to perfect it,
You have
would
to
that
move.
not also perfect your spiritual reality?
Yeah, certainly it would contribute. It would contribute, but it's not the ultimate. The ultimate is that when you see nothing but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the concept of annihilation or mahw that the mystics talk about. And if you look at the history of mysticism in Islam, Chitik talks about it, and Nasr as well as others. Ultimately, the traveler in the path of spirituality would reach a point in which he or she sees nothing, really no reality but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's where then you are there. They say you sometimes look at a reality through signs. That's the beginning of it, where we use language, etc. Then you move forward and you begin to feel the heat of fire. And then ultimately you reach a point where you are burned in that fire and you are nothing. That's the point that you truly understand all these, the synthesis between that and sifat and essence and attributes. But until then, everything that we do are a step in the right direction. And each step has a consequence, positive or negative, depending on which way we take it. If we take it in the right direction, it helps our spirituality, sure, to move to right direction. You don't need even, if you just focus on one thing at a time and you see the result in your life. Start with Salat al-Layl. Truly stand up late at night when everybody else is asleep, stand up, turn the light off. Nobody sees you, nobody hears you. Let your heart loose. Within 40 days, you will see the result. You begin to see sparks. All major scholars and mystical scholars, they start from our tradition, they start with this. If you are prepared in the middle of the night to wake up and without letting anyone notice what you're offering, and let your heart go. Marhum Imam rahmatullah alayhi, only we heard about this. I knew that because I was close to the family. Marhum Mustafa was my teacher, his son. Only these stories became apparent after his demise and after his death. His wife told the story. She said, I knew that he would get up and do his Salat al-Layl, but he never, not even once, woke me up. He would wake up so quietly that nobody else hears, and would put a piece of sponge under the tap so the running water would not even make any noise for anyone to wake up. Do his wudu, quietly go to a corner and offer his prayer. Even on the bed, the last breath of his life, still was offering the prayer. Start with this. And you see, every step that we take in the right direction, helpful. But don't be business-minded that I expect this when I take that, when I do this. Do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deal with the consequence. Taqwa means creating a centrifugal force within our life, that this force literally grabs everything that we have and turns it around. There is a center that we move around it. We see nothing, as the verse in the Holy Quran, Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyai wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. All my existence is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the level, then mukashafat and enlightenment takes place. But until we reach that point, every step is helpful. Every right of individual that we fulfill, every condition that we fulfill, every step that we take, every negative attribute that we dispel, every positive attribute that we gain is in the right direction. Sister.
Can you tell me more about, describe more about we should only see nothing but Allah?
Sister, that's again using a language to define a state that we really don't comprehend. Certainly, Ma'sumin and infallibles had reached that point. They see nothing else. If we were to rely on the saying of Amir al-Mu'mineen, لو انكشف الغطاء ما ازددت يقينا. If the entire veils are removed from earth, not iota will increase on my belief and my certainty. This is a level that, under normal circumstance, we really fail to comprehend.
Yeah, because we have the world material.
Yes. So what we need to do is to start by moving away from the material to the reality of who we are, which is our own spirituality and our souls. Abu Dhar is asked, why is it that we are afraid of death so much? He said, because we spend our life only cultivating the material world and at the expense of the hereafter and the spiritual world that ultimately is the place of abode. So let's start step by step. Forget about, personal advisors or gurus that they talk about. They come and sit with you and say, okay, where do you want to be in 10 years from now, 20? What's the maximum goal? I want to become the best tennis player in the world. Okay, that is a lofty idea at the moment. Start holding the racket in your hand. Once you correctly hold the racket, then you play with the racket, backhand, forehand, etc. Then double hand, and so on. Ultimately, you reach a point, then they throw you a ball, very slow ball, hit it. And ultimately move faster and faster until you reach a point where you become a player. Then you have to practice a number of years. The same principle exists. That the moment that we say, I want to reach that point, annihilation, right from the beginning that I haven't taken any step, it's a quantum leap. It's not going to happen. What I have to do right now, I have messed up the rest of my life, 40 years, 50 years, 20 years, whatever. How can I shift it and change it in the right direction? What do I need to do? This small step would help. Once I perfect it, that small step, and becomes part of my nature, then I go for the next step, add to the first one. Gradually, step one by one, until we move towards that direction. We may never make it. But being Ibn al-Waqt means I've done my best at this particular moment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to ask me beyond what I'm capable.
How do I know I'm on the right path?
Well, start by tawbah, that's number one. And moving into the right direction. Dispelling with negative attributes. Controlling our tongues. Remember, during the month of Ramadan, we're supposed to come out. I used the metaphor of the box, the input-output box, where the person that walks in is totally different from the person that comes out. We use the month of Ramadan to control our tongue, our vision, etc., our thought, and so on and so forth. Start by that kind of practice. Fasting itself helps. If you start every week at least 2 or 3 days of fasting, that would help you. Say Thursday, Friday, or Monday, Thursday, Friday, 2 or 3 days a week, that the habit remains. And really pay attention to how you behave. It's not just hunger and thirst. Once you do this, then gradually we are moving into the right direction. But don't think right from the beginning, well, I want to reach the annihilation. It may never happen. We have too much of a baggage on our back. And the shackle of Nafs Ammara is so much that to break away from it is Jihadul Akbar that the Holy Prophet talks about. Once you break away, you are free. Then you can organize your life and change the direction. As long as there is a Persian poet that says, if you are holding tasbih in your hand, and you say astaghfirullah on your lips, but your heart still longs for sin, what kind of istighfar is this? So let's start step by step, taking baby steps, as they say.